speaking of a party, White House Correspondence Dinner. I have no problem with jokes. I like to laugh. I just don't like to be the punchline. Quite frankly, I think they should end this thing because we're looking at a situation that the president is telling punchlines about the American people and about the press corps, as well as the comedian and Joe McHale, and it's advancing things that we really don't need. They can do this, but it shows how out of touch they are, and it further divides the country. Now, I'll say this for Republican and Democratic president. When you pal around with people that are supposed to be holding you to account, it tells us that there are two levels. One for the elite establishment, and I recognize Ted Cruz and Chris Christie, a whole host of people are there. Again, that's fine. It's a party. I'll hang out and tell jokes. Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. But the two levels are now the elite establishment and the rest of us who are directly impacted by these policies. And we're being made fun of because your corruption or failure is somehow ha-ha, or the false narratives that we advance are not looked at as false narratives anymore because they are advanced so often that they've divided America. We have a problem. I don't want the Fourth Estate to be a part of this nonsense. I don't fault the president for doing it or people attending. I get it. I think the thing should end because we need people representing us and we need accountability. And this is just really not funny. Roll it.
Or as Paul Ryan refers to you, yet another inner city minority relying on the federal government to feed and house your family. Ted Cruz proposed a government shutdown to protest the Affordable Care Act, and everyone else in Congress decided to go along with it simply to get some time away from Ted Cruz. The Tea Party is anti-socialism and anti-immigration, so it makes sense that their hero is a Cuban from Canada. Poignant. That one was poignant. As it stands right now, the Republican presidential nominee will either be Jeb Bush, Rand Paul, or a bag of flour with Ronald Reagan's face drawn on it. Bag of flour. All right.
All right. So you have the jokes, distasteful and not what we wanted for. So bottom line, here's the thing. We have these things advanced consistently. Consistently. And they're advanced as narratives about conservatives or reforming government. Again, if somebody wants to do an adult comedy show and do that, so be it. That's their business. But we're talking about the presidency of the United States, White House Correspondence Dinner, the people holding the president in check and ostensibly the most powerful. And we have a comedian up there, once again, laughing at the false narratives that are actually advanced by the leadership of the left. And it's hurting America. So with that in mind, we go to, out of the gate, we go to a example of what I just spoke to. And that would be the economic situation. That's right. Here is our labor secretary, Mr. Perez, Secretary Perez, being asked about the abysmal numbers of last week's economic report. Remember, here's the theme. We're not getting answers. You decide if we're getting answers. Roll it.
Mr. Secretary, I'd love to come back to the participation rate because I think it's going to be a focus today. It appears that people 55 and older actually increased in terms of labor participation, so it's not necessarily about people retiring, but the civilian labor force dropped by 806,000 in April. The participation rate down by 0.4 percentage points, lowest it's been since 1978. I mean, come on, what is going on here?
Well, again, I mean, you look at the participation rates over the last few months, and they bounce up, they bounce down. What I saw about last month's numbers is that the number of discouraged workers did not go up. And what we usually see this time of year is that seasonal workers are preparing to enter the workforce. And what we saw last month is that they may not have prepared to enter then. And so I'm going to be watching this number carefully next month, and as I do every month. But this is the household survey, and the participation rates have been bouncing up and down over the last 6 months, and we'll certainly be monitoring that. But you look at the payroll survey, and you see 288,000 jobs, and you see the adjustments from last month. The economy is clearly moving in the right direction, and we want to continue to pick up the pace and have more months where we're seeing 300,000 jobs being created like we almost saw last month.
No real answer in there, and it is because we have – now, understand, I haven't even gotten into the statistical analysis completely yet of that. Arnold Allard has spoken to it. Dan the Man Celia has talked about the GDP way before anybody else. You can catch Dan, obviously, in the morning right here on AFR Talk. Here's my point, and listen, the idea is we're not getting an answer for the people leaving the workforce or the part-time workforce, and we have a number that lowers when it comes to our unemployment number, but the fact is we're not in a recovery. We're in an anemic recovery, a flaccid recovery, and the worst recovery since the Great Depression. So you tell me why you've had, the left have had the Congress and the presidency for up to 2012, and then 2010, we saw a little pushback, pardon me, in the House, but you had your agenda put forth. And what happened? Your policies are not working. So we're not getting answers, which means I know somebody out of work, you know somebody out of work, maybe somebody in your own family, and you're dealing with this. That's what we're dealing with. It's not funny. It's not funny. We go to we could go to the racist narrative, I believe now. Yeah. This is Representative Clyburn speaking to that, I believe. Roll it.
Fellow Democrat, a fellow Southern colleague, Vinnie Thompson, has called Clarence Thomas a, quote, Uncle Tom. He doubled down on that again yesterday, suggested Mitch McConnell was a racist, said a lot of really inflammatory things. Does that cause you any concerns?
No, I think Benny Thompson, as you know, is a very close friend. Ben and I knew each other for 20 years before we ever came to Congress.
You think it's all right to be calling the Supreme Court Justice
all of us,
Uncle Tom?
All of us have ways of expressing our disappointments. I am very disappointed in Clarence Thomas.
Do you think he's an Uncle Tom?
Well, I don't know.
You don't know if the Supreme Court Justice is an Uncle Tom?
Well, he's not the only Supreme Court Justice there now. We have 9 of them.
Right, but he's the only one that's been called an Uncle Tom. I think that's an extraordinary insult.
Well, that may be, and you have to ask Benny Thompson about that. As you know, there are certain words and phrases I do not use, but I am, and I will never back away from this. I am extremely disappointed. Joe, we come to the Congress or we go to these appointments, and we ought to bring to those bodies our experiences to help broaden the application of justice in this country.
Clarence Thomas has had an experience of being genuinely Southern and being proudly black, just like you, and his experience led him to a different philosophy about government, and I don't know that he should be castigated because his experience as a black American is different from Benny Thompson's experience as a black American. Can't we disagree with each other without insulting each other and calling each other names?
Sure we can. And I talked to someone yesterday who told me that they were highly insulted by some of the expressions that Clarence Thomas has made in his writings, in his opinions. A lot of African Americans find his opinions very insulting.
All right,
but he has a right to that.
Benny Thompson, though, so you have no problems with him calling him Uncle Tom?
Well, Benny Thompson's a very close personal friend.
Right.
We don't always use the same words and phrases.
Is Mitch McConnell, do you think, is Benny Thompson thinks Mitch McConnell?
I don't know. You have to about that.
All right.
Okay, but now we take a greater context. Yeah, he's talking about his buddy, his friend, but he's slurring somebody, and he's allowing that to stand up, and then even going to his opinions. Here's my point. The way race has been used, even when Joe Scarborough rightfully calls out somebody and says, that is absurd, that is ridiculous, how dare you? They're still not drawing the line. People who are doing this and invoking this. And with the Ryan budget, for example, that has been used a lot. It happened to Daniel Patrick Moynihan, by the way, who was a Democrat years back, 69, is it, with the report. It's about behavior and about out-of-wedlock birth and a culture of dependency and incentivizing that. And I've pointed out in a Bruce Thornton piece that cites a study that talks about dependency. It has nothing to do with the color of one's skin. It has everything to do with behavior and dependency. Here's the point to take away. When you have that going on and advanced and dividing America falsely, and you don't have the mainstream media calling people to account for the absurdity of it, when you have a Department of Justice that has abandoned the race-neutral policy, when you have an economy where the Secretary of Labor cannot answer a question, but certainly can obfuscate a whole lot when we haven't recovered, and when we have a situation where 4 Americans are dead and we still don't have answers, and now it's called a conspiracy theory. That's next. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth and the White House Correspondence Dinner. AFR Talk.